Hello everybody, my name is Brady and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be finishing the extra history series on Admiral Yi. I don't really know what to expect in this one. In the previous one, I thought we got that moment, from the first episode where it opens up and it was just music, no voiceover, and it just showed kind of the devastation of the battle. And I thought we got that in the previous one, but now I'm not sure if that was the moment that we were looking for. Now I'm not sure if we're actually going to be getting that moment in this one. I can't tell. He's just going around destroying people. It's hard to tell one from the other. But while that one had a moment where it felt like, hey, this is big, this is huge, it didn't feel as big as it felt in the first episode. So now I'm thinking oh, maybe we're getting that here. So that's what I hope to see or think I'm going to see. I don't know what I hope to see, but I think we're going to be getting that in this one. I don't know. The episode is called Martial Lord of Loyalty. We're on number 5 out of 5. I'm very excited to get this started. Let's do this.
When we left off, Yi had crushed the Japanese at the Battle of Myeongyang and was busy rebuilding the Korean Navy after their disastrous losses while he was being falsely accused. Now, just as he's beginning to coordinate with the Chinese Navy on how to prosecute the war, something major happens. Maybe the one event that can truly change the course of this war. Hideyoshi dies. 6 years and 4 months after the fateful Japanese landing on Korea, the man who started it all, the man who envisioned a vast Asian empire radiating out from Japan, died. This was a sea change. Hideyoshi had been holding the Japanese in Korea by sheer force of will. As soon as he died, the council of men who ran Japan in his stead all looked at one another and said, "Does anyone here actually want to keep fighting Korea? Okay, show of hands, who wants to stay in Korea? Nobody? All right then." With that, they agreed to pull the Japanese forces out of there as soon as they could negotiate a deal which would let them withdraw their forces safely. But the Koreans were not so eager for peace after seeing hundreds of thousands of their countrymen slaughtered during Hideyoshi's invasion.
Okay, so I was thinking that this was starting to make me think, oh, maybe that previous part in the episode was that part now. But now we're going to have them feeling kind of spiteful. Now they actually militarily have a little bit of leverage with Yi back on top. No, not formally on top, but he's kind of taking control of things. So whatever, on top, whatever.
Admiral Yi continued to coordinate with the Chinese forces to bottle up the Japanese in one of their last strongholds, the port of Suncheon. The Chinese army closed around the city on land, and the Korean and Chinese navies blockaded the port. Seeing the situation as hopeless, the Japanese commander decided the best option he had left was to try to bribe everybody. But each time it seemed as though he was succeeding in bribing the Chinese contingents, Yi shamed them into falling back in line. Seeing no hope of peaceful retreat, the Japanese commander had one last plan. He dispatched a messenger boat to slip through the Chinese lines and tell the other major Japanese garrison to deploy all their ships and rendezvous with him as they tried to break their way through the Chinese and Korean blockade. But Yi got word of this plan, and knew that he must prepare. The next night, November 15th, 1598, long after the sun had fallen below the horizon, and the water had faded from blue to deep black, Yi told his forces to slip away from the blockade. They would try to intercept the reinforcing fleet in the fateful Noryang Strait. Near 2 a.m., the joint Korean and Chinese fleet fell upon...
Okay, this is it. Okay, I've just been kind of obsessing over this moment because it was such a strong bit of storytelling at the beginning. It would have helped if I remembered what the date was from the first one, because I know it had that and it's 28 years earlier or something. But dates, sometimes they're hard to remember right out. And I don't know if I ever got the date or if I just got that it was this many years earlier. I don't know. It's been a handful of days since watching the first one. I'll have to go back and watch it again.
Upon the resting Japanese ships. At first it was chaos, cannon lighting up the water at night, but soon the Japanese tried to regroup. Despite being caught off guard, they still had 500 ships to the combined 150 of Yi and the Chinese. And moreover, they were fueled by desperation. If they lost here, who knows if they'd ever see Japan again? But the Allied forces had two advantages going for them as well. For one, they had once again caught the Japanese in a strait where they could not easily maneuver their massive fleet. And two, even if they could maneuver, many of their ships were transports, which were only useful for boarding and arquebus fire in a fight. In desperation, the Japanese...
Okay, so I read some of the comments, every once in a while I catch a few. I try not to read too many of the comments when it's a series, because I don't want it to get spoiled. I kind of want to watch this like it's a show, and I get to the natural conclusion or whatever. But I looked at some of the comments, and I guess Japanese naval strategy involved a lot of boarding, and that was kind of one of the problems with the turtle ship, because he couldn't really board the turtle ship. The fact that it was covered and had spikes on it, and was generally a pain in the butt. So that actually makes a whole lot of sense why that would have been a problem for the Japanese. Maybe another naval force could have been able to handle that, but they were so used to boarding ships, and that was the unboardable ship. It was not a very good strategy. Hey, bud, you doing all right?
Japanese attacked, driving their ships through the withering hail of the enemy cannonade. Unfortunately for Yi, the Chinese commander, who wasn't used to fighting the Japanese and had no experience with Yi's long-range form of naval warfare, charged forward to meet the Japanese fleet and prepared to engage them in hand-to-hand combat. The Chinese commander was surrounded. Dozens of Japanese ships descended on the Chinese flagship. Yi ordered his own ship to attempt a rescue. Yi's flagship plunged into the midst of the enemy. He was committed now. It would be fierce, close combat the rest of the way. Exactly the type of fight Yi had always tried to avoid. The vessels were so close that unarmed Korean sailors began throwing bundles of burning sticks down on the enemy decks. As Yi's ship broke through the waves, he spotted 3 of the enemy's admirals standing on the deck of one of the Japanese ships attacking his ally. And so, Yi drew his bow and loosed. One of the admirals fell. For a moment, there was almost a silence in the midst of the fighting, as everybody looked to see where that arrow had come from. Then one of the Japanese admirals roused himself from his shock and shouted that it was Yi. All the ships must attack Yi.
It was personally Yi who shot the arrow. That's actually quite epic, straight up storytelling stuff. That's one of those details. It's hard to believe that he would personally have done that, but I think it's very much keeping with the pattern of how he has conducted battle. He's lost one element of how he conducts battle, but he still has that moment where take out the Admiral and then everything falls apart. One thing with the mention of the Chinese, I guess I never really understood where they stood as far as the power structure of the region goes. It seems implied that the Japanese are the most powerful and that everybody else is firmly the underdog in this case, but I had a little bit of trouble being sure about that, but I don't know. I feel like I have an okay grasp of the Japanese being the top dog right now.
All the Japanese vessels turned and began to give chase to Yi's flagship. But now it was the Chinese admiral's turn to take action, and his ships tore into the vessels pursuing Yi. Soon the fight was on the deck of the Chinese flagship, Chinese Dao sparking against Japanese katana. In the end, the Japanese boarding parties were repelled, but many from both sides lay dead on the deck. As dawn began to bring light back to the scene, everyone could see how badly the Japanese were faring. They attempted to flee, but Yi would have none of it. These people who had come to his land, who had despoiled his home, who had slaughtered his people and endangered his nation, no, he would not let them flee. He grabbed the mallet from the ship's drummer and began to beat the war drum himself, urging his ships to go ever faster. The haunting echo of the drum pushed the fleet on. Its beat hounded the Japanese, bit at their heels.
I understand this is a moment of passion as much as it is possibly a military necessity. I'm not sure. I feel like if I were in Yi's position, I guess I'm naive. I might just let them go and try to make a peace and have the war be over. But I understand that perhaps you can't trust them. Perhaps you can't trust that the war is going to be over if they get a chance to go back and recollect themselves. So I don't know to what extent they understand the political desire back at home for the Japanese to kind of get out of the war if he is kind of under the impression that, oh, we don't know that they want to leave. Because when they mention stuff going on over in Japan, I don't know how much Yi is privy to that information. So if he doesn't know, I totally understand him, like, going hard on this. But I guess I kind of understand it both ways as well, because this has become so deeply personal, but also in a position of power like he has. I don't think it's supposed to get as deeply personal when it comes to, like, ending a war. But also, we're all humans, so what can I say?
Fleet moved like it never had before, the drums steadily beating like the call of the god of war. They were upon the Japanese. Cannons roared, arquebuses answered. Shouts and screams were heard as ship after ship was caught by the pursuing fleet, possessed by the beat of the drums of war. But then, just for an instant, the drums faltered. Seen by no one but his son, his nephew, and a loyal servant, Yi had been struck by a stray arquebus ball. They rushed to his side as he slumped against the drum, trying to aid him, asking if there was anything they could do. With his last breath, he said to them, "We are about to win this war. Keep beating the drum. Do not let anyone know of my death." His son picked up the mallet and continued the beat. Dressed in Yi's armor, his son and his nephew took up the command. For hours, they were Yi, commanding as he would, with all his ability and skill. None of Yi's officers ever realized he had fallen until, as the battle was closing, the Chinese flagship was once again surrounded. Yi's son ordered his ship into the thick. They darted forward, breaking the cordon around the Chinese flagship, helping the Chinese to escape. The fighting was fierce, but it was near the last of it. And as the day closed, the Chinese admiral sailed toward Yi's flagship and called out to thank Yi for saving him, to invite Yi to celebrate the glorious day together. But he was met by Yi's son. Instantly, he knew what had happened, and 3 times he threw himself to the deck, wailing and crying out, "Even after death, you saved my life." This was the last battle of the war.
Okay, now this is the shot from before. Okay. It took me a while to really understand, like, the other, I think I had like 2 other moments where I felt faked out and thinking that was that. It's interesting that they were able to drill the significance of this moment into my head before it even happened. And I've just been obsessing about it, thinking like, oh, okay, is this that moment? Is this that moment? And finally we're there. Okay.
100 Japanese ships were destroyed or captured. After this, the remaining Japanese garrisons would either be captured one by the Chinese and Korean forces, or slip back to Japan to fight one last struggle before Tokugawa's ascension as shogun. At last, the Imjin War was at an end. Hideyoshi's dream of a Japanese empire was broken. Korea was free. But Yi would never see it. Thousands turned out to see his body returned to his small home village. People lined the road and wailed at the passing of a man they may never have met. The Chinese admiral wrote for him a eulogy, and even the court and the king tried to make their recompense. And so passed the man so ill-treated in life, so often demoted and accused, the man who would forever be known as the martial lord of loyalty.
That was pretty sick, man. How does one even describe this? A lot of the extra history stuff is like personal history sort of stuff. It's very biographical. In Yi's case, it wasn't as personal. You don't get as much of him, like, the man. Like, you do, kind of in how he served, but, like, it's never independent of his military service, which is, I think, one of the things that made this unique. I know early on I was saying, like, I want something a little bit outside of that to understand who he is beyond that, but perhaps there wasn't as much beyond that. Perhaps that's just, like, clearly he dedicated, like, a big chunk of his life to this, so that became his life. So that seems to be the vibe that I get from this. I love that moment. There is something climactic at the end. Like, he doesn't make it, but one more little sacrifice. Not really a sacrifice. I don't know the word for it, but one little moment where, like, don't acknowledge my death right now. That is just one of the things that, just one last moment of badassery, which I thought was really cool and wrapped this up super well. Another thing about Yi, I feel like compared to the other extra history videos, he didn't have as many, like, character antagonists. There were many broad ideas that kind of went against him. There were a few named characters, but there didn't seem to be as many named characters in his story. So that's another thing where it's like all him, really. And it's really impressive that they were able to tell that story so effectively. I liked it. I thought it was really good. So I guess now is the time. Let me know which extra history series you want me to do next. I might go back to the old poll and just take whoever was in third place, maybe. But I'll be looking in the comments as well, so we'll see what ends up happening. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow. All right, bye.